Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we got ourselves a track from an act named MYSTHAVEN titled The Unseen, and if we switch over to here, if I'm not mistaken here, it's got female fronted metal, symphonic metal, Celtic metal based in the US. Welcome to our first music video. This song is part of our first EP titled Madness, so it's off of their Madness EP and we're going to listen through this track from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Got it on YouTube, the official music video. Let's go, let's do it. It's a beautiful song so far. And vocal layers now. Phenomenal build there. Nice clean there. Nice close. I mean, I've got absolutely no complaints so far. I know this is maybe not the best way to pause, but I think this sounds like a band that's got a real future to them. Like, there's just the fundamentals are adhered to, and we're doing a really interesting stuff beyond that. You know, we'll talk about that at the end though. Just knowing to vocal layer like this in this part as well for that extra atmosphere. create a little pinch harmonica there, nice. I thought we were gonna add more piano at the end. It could have been called like a piano sort of fade out or something like that, but I think I got most of the words through clearly. I'm just gonna double check and then we're gonna talk about this track more and the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named MYSTHAVEN, titled The Unseen, where we're going to talk about a few things that I liked about the tracks, as well as any sort of applicable constructive critique, and finally my overall thoughts on it from just a general listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? Truth be told, I thought I'd heard the words in the track, and I don't mean to sound like I'm going on a negative sort of like tangent immediately. I just didn't get all the words through clearly. It could just be like an enunciation thing. It could be that there was like a lot of other stuff going on that I was sort of like paying attention to at the time, but they've actually got the lyrics in the description of the video itself. And I love the poetry within it. I think that this track, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like I've got this incorrect, it's about someone or something where either we cannot live up to their expectations of what's required, or maybe they're just not enough to be seen or not enough to be okay. And effectively, the person is not there anymore, but they're there maybe in spirit or memory. Like maybe the person's passed away and we remember them clearly now or something like that, or they feel close to us even though they're not here anymore. And it's up to us to try and be the best we can and just continue to find a way to move forward. I think there's like a mention in the interlude section of "Don't dwell on thoughts that cause you pain, we'll see each other once again, phrase at peace, trying to believe it was his time he had to leave." Yeah, so I think it's about someone who passed away, and it's about sort of struggling with the loss of that person and trying to do the best that we can to try and make our way through the difficulty of losing someone, was knowing they're close, and sort of trying to find value in our own parts and appreciating who they were and what they meant to us. I think that's what this is about. So in terms of things I appreciated about the track, I'm actually re-recording this part because I went on a big old ramble before. I didn't really know how to phrase it effectively. The first thing I'll talk about is world building. So I think that what we did really well is we had the start of the track there, sort of like implementing again those folk instruments. You got like the lutes, and you've got the flutes, and then you've also got the harp there with their individual sort of distinct tones and textures that just niche really effortlessly with each other due to how they sound and their relative pitches. But also it creates the atmosphere of being in that sort of like mystical kind of like fairyland or something like that. It also reminds me of a lot of media that I've watched, like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and other tracks like that. I think that you could have probably have gotten away with 5 minutes of that, but to then know to kind of have that intensity with the heavier elements of the guitar, bass, and drums later on, with the vocal harmonies, the choirs, the strings, pads, everything, and for most of the middle part was just fantastic there. We set the scene and aesthetic initially, we kind of built over time with additional vocal layers and other elements there, and sort of like hand percussion and tambourines and stuff like that. And so the listener, if they're unfamiliar with this, is going to think, oh, okay, where are we getting to? Why is it getting bigger and bigger? And bam, you just got that satisfying hit again of those power chord elements with the distorted guitar, the kind of like 8th, 16th, and quarter patterns on the onbeat and syncopated drum parts, as well as the bass guitar providing a fantastic ground floor for everything. And I think that it's not just stylistically appropriate for the kind of music that we're doing there. It just makes a track more interesting when you're able to create different chapters to a story. And when you had the vocalists doing more sort of specific kind of focused storytelling there, you got kind of taken away from the ether that you were in and down the sort of like the rabbit hole further. And at the end, coming out of the sword element, you had the flutes there and the keys and everything kind of like sitting us out a little bit. Just that bell curve taking us back to where we began there, like we've been taken on a big old journey. It was just really satisfying structurally, but also just in terms of how authentic it is to the style of music that they're doing, the magical nature of the instruments combined with that. It's just really cool. I also think like just the actual technical proficiency on display is really endearing. So like clearly, like the lute by itself, the stringed instrument there being unfretted, it's very difficult to find relative pitch for things. So the fact that we were able to do that and in a way where it's rhythmically and harmonically really satisfying alongside the flute playing, which was wonderfully dexterous. We're very flexible with the melodic approaches there. And the harp as well, which is a fantastic additional component on the top side. It was also the intensity of expression. That's another part of technical proficiency, is the control over that is really sort of satisfying. To kind of continue to add layers and get more sort of comfortable things that we build up over like the first minute or so, knowing how to stack things is an art. And to create that sort of initial motif and to then follow on with similar sort of key or chordal decisions within the heavier elements was really sort of sick. But it's also the kind of palm muting on the electric guitars for some of the rhythm parts there, the use of different sort of like tom fills, but also really quick double kicks and parts there, knowing how to sort of like establish a groove in a similar pace there and kind of make things a bit sort of catchier, I suppose, on the kit, to allow space for everything else without being too sort of attention grabby, but also knowing when to sort of like pop off and get out of pocket is really cool. And it's also, again, having some instruments doing less. So again, you have like the choir sections forming those sort of like harmonies like on the sides there instead of melodies there, things building up there, the brass as well. But also I think the lack of solo sections is a sensible decision as well, because what I would like to do, I mean, aside from like the flute parts, there were some flute solos through the track, which I appreciated. I just thought that they had a real sort of like relaxing tonality to them whilst being interesting with the note choices. And the little flutters and sort of like legato passages there were almost mesmerizing. It was such a contrast to the heaviness of the guitars and drums. Yeah, I think outside of that though, the main reason we didn't have any sort of like main sort of instrumental solos during the heavier parts was to allow room for the vocals, because I thought that the singing was that'll be the final thing I talk about here. The singing was fantastic. I appreciated both that the lady female vocals and the guys vocals. They have very different styles. It was a much cleaner sound to the way that the ladies sung. They're very comfortable in her upper range there, head voice vibrato there, and I think there were harmonies on the part of that as well. But like, it was not only herself potentially harmonizing or double tracking, the lady also sung really well with the male vocalist as well. And because they are in different vocal ranges, they just coupled so effortlessly with one another. And just because they weren't sort of fighting for attention within the stereo field or the frequency spectrum. And again, due to the lack of aforementioned kind of like solo parts in the heavier sections, they could do whatever they wanted melodically. Like they coupled themselves really neatly with the sort of any other harmonies there. They worked well within the diatonics of the chord progressions and bass lines and stuff. But whether they were by themselves, I mean, I think the lady was the first verse and then the guy was the second verse, and they had their own sort of perspectives, interpretations of it. It was just very easy to listen to, you know. It was just really sort of like satisfying. And when you have different vocalists as well, it just makes the track more interesting because you don't get too used to sort of one sound. We're switching up to this, it's unpredictable. So it's effective, it's intriguing. And there's like an additional part around the 4:15 mark. We have a bit more of a kind of a harsher vocal fry style that's just a bit more aggressive there, and it is a further contrast to some of the lower range kind of male vocals that are a bit kind of boomier. Like we have different voicings of different things. It's just really neat. I like that we aren't taking the listener's attention for granted, that we can both sing well and sing in a way which makes the track more compelling alongside all the other fun things. And I think also allowing ourselves to have just the vocal kind of breakdown around the 5 minute was just really clever as well, because it allowed things to flow. You can appreciate the purity of the different vocal takes, and then have everything kind of cut in after that and kind of catch you by surprise. Especially when you've had an amount of heaviness for a certain amount of time there, you get used to it. So taking away that kind of low and mid-range and kind of reintroducing it is just that compelling final finish there. And I think just at the end when we held the notes calling out after the more sort of like familiar kind of like major and minor chordal kind of like oriented power chord pattern there, to go into like the phrygian, some sort of like darker notes before that finish into the solo section of the flute was just really neat. There's honestly lots to appreciate here. In terms of constructive critique, I don't really have any with this one. I mean, like, you could have potentially have had some sort of like sub leads or like a leady guitar solo, or like maybe added more of those flutes or something along those lines into the heavier section sort of, but I think we were deliberately trying to segment them, and I'm totally fine with that. That's really cool. Also, there's just so much to absorb in this track that could have happened. I'm just sort of tripping, and I apologize if that's the case. From a general listening perspective, I do like this kind of music, and I just feel like I'm not entirely sure if I got all the words through on the first listen just because I was trying to focus on everything at once. It's just something to be mindful for, but also I know that there was a lot of coloration and a lot of different sort of like it was quite involved, but I still think the words that were most important came through when they needed to. And I feel like if we can continue to sort of like bundle and adjust these tracks to sort of change the makeups of the vocals, continue to create interesting sort of aesthetics and environments with the different vocal combinations or different instrumental combinations, and continue to tell like really interesting stories, I think we're fine. I think we'll do well. So thank you very much for watching my review of this track from my next name, MYSTHAVEN, Titled The Unseen. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.